verses here, but while you're turning to Daniel chapter 2, developing a walk with God that God can bless. When I was growing up, most of the kids that I knew made at least an annual trip to a place called Cedar Point. Cedar Point for youngsters had a lot of different attractions, but when I was still just a little bit too young for the big rides, they used to have these guys that would run the different games. What's the word I want?
Games of chance?
Carnivals.
Oh, yeah.
Carnival type stuff. And one of them was where they could either guess your birth date, your age, or your weight. And then they'd have prizes. If you could fool them, you got a prize. Well, young children, not super young, but old enough to be running around on their own a little bit, it was too hard to fool them on our age, because there's only a small range, about 5 years, that they had to do to guess. They could narrow it down. They got to ask you a couple questions, I think, is the way it worked. And then the birth date, I don't remember how, but I think it was in the month. They had to get your month. But they could nail that one every time. But I could fool them almost every single time on my weight. They always guessed high. The one guy accused me of having a hollow leg. So in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of Babylon, he had this dream that troubled him greatly. In fact, it troubled him so greatly, made such an impact that he was unable to sleep. And so he sends for all of the astrologers, magicians, or all those types of people that he had in his employ, which would not have been uncommon when someone like that had a dream. We've seen other examples in the scriptures. They tell you what the dream is, and then they tell you what it meant. Nebuchadnezzar, he was a little wily. And he said, all right, guys, I want you to tell me what my dream was. I want you to guess it. If you're worth your salt, you'll be able to guess it. Well, they said to him, oh, king, nobody on earth could do this. Only one of the gods, and none of them live on earth, and we can't do that. So he had all of them executed. I guess that was in their employment contract. Yeah. So I'm going to skip around, but the astrologers answered the king, "There's not a man on the earth," verse 10, "who can do what the king asked. No, king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. Now what the king asked is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among men." It's verses 10 and 11. So that's the backstory, if you will, of what's going on here. The dilemma for our friends, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, primarily Daniel in this chapter, is the king summons him. All right, as we saw back in chapter 1, Daniel and these guys were 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in the kingdom, chapter 1 said. So now it's Daniel's turn. And you can assume that the same conditions are going to apply. Nebuchadnezzar is going to ask him, tell me what my dream is. If he is incapable of answering that question, he's going to meet the same fate as the magician, enchanter, and astrologers that had been summoned before. Now, Daniel prays about this. It's verse 17, "returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends." And here it uses their Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We know them probably better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're Babylonian names. And verse 18, he urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Quite a purge they wiped out a whole bunch of the wise men. Wonder what that means for their civilization. During the night, the mystery, though, was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Daniel praised the God of heaven, and he said, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we have asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." So he sought his friends, and kind of implied in there that there was a prayer request. God honored that, and Daniel praises God for the answer, revealing the king's dream, and the wisdom and the knowledge and the discernment and so forth that he will need. God supplies what is needed. The story continues. Daniel is then taken before the king, and the king asked Daniel, I'm in verse 26, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" So the test really is, can you tell me what my dream was, and then also what the meaning is? And I can trust you when you tell me what the meaning is, that you didn't just make something up that fit the scenario, because if you can tell me the dream, you have really seen this thing. Daniel replied, verse 27, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." So he gives credit where credit's due. He points back to God. "He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are as these." Then he goes on to a lengthy discussion. What it was is that the king had seen the vision of this being or creature or whatever we want to call him, that had a head of gold, that had a chest of silver, that had, the thighs were brass, and the legs were iron, and then of course the feet of a mixture of clay and iron. And these represent 4 kingdoms that we are told. Way down in verse 38, he makes it clear that the first kingdom, the gold kingdom, the head of gold, is that of Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. The next kingdom is the Persian kingdom, we understand it to be, because we know that's what followed the Babylonian kingdom. And it's represented by the chest of silver. And then the interpretation would seem to be, or most would believe to be, that the brass was that of Greece. Alexander the Great came, conquered all this part of the territory, took it away from the Persians and their successors, and after Alexander the Great's death, his kingdom was broken up into 4 parts, went to his kids. And then the legs of iron would be Rome. He even talks about how this Roman kingdom would be divided into 2. And there was, historically, Eastern and Western Roman Empire. Then he mentions, and it's in verse 34, I know I'm skipping around here, I just want to pull out certain details rather than read the whole chapter and comment on it. He says, "While you were watching, though, while this dream was taking place, while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands, It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. And then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time, and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. And that rock is Jesus. And Jesus' kingdom is the one that's going to come and stay and remain forever. It is the eternal kingdom. That's quite a vision. That's quite a thing that God supplied him, the ability to see that. This lasting kingdom. And a kingdom where we know we have a Savior that cares for us. The Babylonian kingdom didn't care for its people too particularly well. The Persian Empire, not much better. The Greeks, a little bit better, maybe. Romans, maybe a little bit. But the kingdom of Jesus is a perfect kingdom, and a wonderful kingdom. So, and there's more that we can say and maybe come back to some of the prophecy parts of this chapter later on. But I was thinking about how Daniel and his friends, now they were called to a particular time and place in ministry, and God equipped them for that ministry. God gave Daniel the ability to know what the king's dream was and the proper interpretation of it. And in so doing, several hundred years of history. Imagine that, being able to know and understand the kingdoms that were coming. We're not given some of those particular gifts, maybe. We're not in the king's service as they were, and specifically ministering in the service of an earthly king. We are in the King Jesus service, though. And we can walk in God's will just like they do. How can we know and walk in God's will the way they did? I mean, there was a certain trust and there was a certain capability. Well, the first is to walk with God. We are not called to religion as the Babylonians understood religion. We are called to a relationship, first and foremost. And we learn God's plan for our life and His will for our life as we walk with Him in relationship. And that includes those times when we follow and obey and listen to what He has to say. Amos has a passage where God asks, how can two walk together unless they agree? There has to be some agreement. In other words, we have to agree. Well, he's not going to change His ways to our ways. We have to bend our ways to conform with His ways. So the first thing is to develop a relationship with Him. And at some point, long before Daniel and his friends came to Babylon, before they were captured, before they were exiled, before all this happened, they had that relationship. And they took it seriously, and they developed that, and through that endured a lot of tumultuous times. We cultivate that relationship today by spending time in His Word. We take times like this to get together for Bible study and prayer, and our own personal prayer time and Bible study time, and every opportunity to be involved in these opportunities. When we seek to develop these things, we talk about them, ask questions, and encourage each other in them. That helps build our walk with God. Beyond our walk, there's also our will. And I mentioned this earlier. We have to surrender our will to God. Many times we're tempted, or maybe we just do without thinking. We do it this way. We say, Lord, this is what my plans are. Now please come along and bless them.
Yeah.
And that's just reality. And I think a lot of times we do that without even thinking about it. And sometimes we do it because we really don't know what else to do. Well, Lord, I'm going to try this, and if you're favorable towards it, come bless it. But we want to instead do His way. Jesus always was the perfect example, and He said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours, Father, in His prayer to the Father the night before He died on the cross. So that is our model, is to always seek God's will. And we understand that God will be likely slow to show us His plan if we're going to do what we want anyway. But if we're really, truly willing and interested in what God's will is, He will show it to us. And then to obey or to follow what we know He has shown us, to walk in it. And God can lead us in several different ways to show us that. He can reveal His will as He transforms our lives and our minds are renewed and we're following Him. And He's speaking to us. There can be a voice that will say to us, here's the way, walk in it. And we've had those promptings. There's clear direction in God's Word. Sometimes things to do, sometimes things to avoid. And there are other things that God can speak to us about, doing His will. Well, when He speaks to us, it's important that we follow it. Again, Amos records where God says, how can two walk together unless they agree? If we're not in agreement, we're going to be not in sync with Him, not in step with Him and with His Spirit. So we are to obey that will. We are also to seek godly input. First and foremost, God speaks to us through His Word, but He can speak to us through His Word collectively in a group. That is, you can have others in your life that are trusted people that will search the Scriptures with you, that will pray with you, and you can talk about what it is that God's wanting you to do, or maybe as a group what He wants you to do. Whatever comes from a source other than the Scripture needs to be in line with the Scripture if it's to be valid and to be trustworthy and to be followed. But we understand the Bible says that where there is no counsel, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Proverbs 11 and verse 14. And of course, the ultimate place for that is the church and our Bible study and efforts and the fellowship that we experience as an opportunity, a place there for that counsel, that encouragement. What is the proverb that says, with many advisors, victory is sure. So there's a place for that godly input. Now, Daniel and his friends walked with God. They had the relationship. They clearly had surrendered their will to God, and they had been obedient to Him. We saw that really in chapter 1, where they weren't going to defile themselves, but they committed themselves. They resolved to live for God. They sought godly input, and there was a passage here that really stood out to me when it was back in verse 17 following. Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends. He's seeking godly input. He's telling them what's going on, and I think it's implied there that he's encouraging them to pray for him and with him in this matter. He urged them, in fact, to plead for mercy from the God of heaven. Now, if that isn't a request for prayer, I don't know what it is, concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed. Well, there's a pretty substantial thing that they're praying about here. There's a big cost. So he sought that godly input, but his trust ultimately was in God. It wasn't in the people. He just sought their fellowship and cooperation, participation in this. And they had a little bit at stake too, because they all would have faced certain death. And then pay attention, to what God does next, because when we pray and we seek God and we're following God, He's going to show us something. The Experiencing God series that I value so much, that teaches us how to know, recognize, and do God's will. It's good training for that. It's good discipleship. He says God is always at work, and when He shows you what He's doing, that is your invitation to join in. I mean, He's always working. Jesus said, He and the Father have always been at work, and they still are, going to be. until we're in heaven complete. There's still work. There's still things that He's doing. We don't always see it, but when He does reveal something, that is an invitation to join in. And we can also look at our own selves. And we're talking about God's will. We can think about, as Daniel and his friends must have, how they had been put together. They were, and again, I'm referring back to some things we already talked about in chapter 1. What is it that made them, in every matter of wisdom and understanding, 10 times better than the magicians and enchanters in the whole kingdom? What is it that got them recruited in the first place to go into this training program for the king's servants? Well, God had gifted them. And so we need to look at our spiritual gifts. We need to look at what it is that God has given us to do, gifted us, and enabled us to do. What has He equipped us to do? What is our heart? What is it that He's wired us to do? What is it that He has, what are our strengths? What are our abilities? Things that He's qualified us to do. Things that He's created in us. And even our experiences. They had all of that to draw on. In fact, when we talk to especially younger Christians about knowing God's will and trying to find their place in His service, we'll talk about the acronym SHAPE. God has shaped you, and that stands for your spiritual gifts, those things that God has specially and specifically given you as a Christian. Your heart, that is those things that God has really given you a desire to do, or something really matters, important to you. Abilities. Not everybody has the same abilities, but everybody has, I think it's between 300 and 500 abilities, things that you can do. And then personality. There's all different kinds of personalities. Some are more outgoing, some are more reserved. God has a place for every personality. He designed it, created it that way. And then our experiences, positive and negative. When you look at Daniel and his friends, they were obviously equipped. They were gifted at this. They were able to do the learning that was put in front of them. They were able to do the communicating in another culture. Like a lot of missionaries today, they have to have that ability, not only to have the language skills, but to really be able to communicate and to assimilate in another culture in order to carry out missionary work overseas. And they had experiences that they were able to draw on, positive and negative, and just who they were. And it put them in a place then where, when called upon, God could give them what they needed to carry out a very special mission, and that was to tell Nebuchadnezzar what Nebuchadnezzar was needing to know. And what he needed to know was not the answer to the dream, what this figure of gold, silver, brass, and iron represented. Well, that was nice to know, but it wasn't the main thing to know. And verse 46, this is what he needed to know. And this is what Daniel told him at the outset that he needed to know. That there was only one, it's the God in heaven, who could tell Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of his dream. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered an offering and incense to be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." What the king needed to know was that this is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and revealer of mysteries. Whether or not Nebuchadnezzar ever made a personal connection through faith or relationship of some kind with the God, who is the true God, the Lord God, we don't know for sure, but this is quite a statement coming from the most powerful ruler at the time, that this God, your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries. God equips us, He shaped us, He puts us in a certain place as we walk with Him and follow Him, know His will and do His will, so that people in our lives and our ministry will know that Jesus is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and revealer of mysteries, and the soon coming King to an everlasting kingdom as well. So that, switch over to prayer requests.
Well,